My friends, we gather in a time of great confusion. The world watches with weary eyes as tensions rise between Iran, America, and Israel. There are whispers of war, loud cries for justice, and headlines soaked with division. Nations draw lines, leaders speak of threats, and the common heart trembles beneath the weight of uncertainty. But beyond the news, beyond the politics, beyond the military might, there is something deeper we must not ignore. This is not just a clash of countries, it is a crisis of the soul. It is a reflection of what happens when fear replaces faith, when pride overtakes purpose, when love is overshadowed by the lust for power. We are not just spectators to these struggles, we are participants in the spirit of this age. The question is not only why these nations fight, but what this fight is revealing about the human heart. There is a reason behind the conflict. A reason rooted in history, tangled in belief, soaked in generations of mistrust. But even more than that, there is a call to each of us to rise above the noise, to seek understanding over accusation, to choose peace in a world addicted to hostility. The real battle is not just on the ground. It is in the hearts of men and women across every nation. And the solution will not be found in missiles or mandates, but in a return to truth, to mercy, and to a higher calling that transcends borders and banners. This is not a time for fear. It is a time for courage, not a time for silence, but for boldness, not a time to take sides, but to stand for something greater than sides, something eternal. Let us open our eyes not only to what is happening in the world, but to what must change within us if we ever hope to see peace reign where war now threatens. There comes a time in every life when we must look beyond the headlines, beyond the flags, beyond the speeches of powerful men. There comes a time when we must ask, what is the real cost of the battles we watch unfold from afar? Not the cost in currency, not even in politics, but in people, in mothers and fathers, in sons and daughters, in those who never chose the fight but lived through its fire. This is the cost that no world leader ever fully counts. This is the cost that cannot be measured in treaties or television coverage. It is the cost of human souls caught in the storm of ambition. We speak of borders as though they are walls that divide us into neat categories. This nation, that nation, this side, that side. But the pain of a mother who buries her child looks the same in every language. The cry of a hungry child does not change with geography. The tears of a father who cannot protect his family fall just as heavily in every land. The heart does not carry a passport, and when we look beyond the boundaries drawn by governments and empires, we begin to see what truly matters: people. In my own life, I have seen how easily we fall into the trap of taking sides. We are taught to see the world through the lens of our upbringing, our country, our faith, our fears. But something happens when we dare to look into the eyes of another person, not as an enemy, but as a fellow traveler. Something changes when we stop asking who is right and start asking who is hurting. I have walked through places scarred by war. I have spoken with men who carried hate like a badge of honor, only to be broken by the truth that vengeance never heals. I have watched young people, full of hope, lose everything because power. Hungry rulers saw them as pawns, not people. The battle between Iran, America, and Israel is more than a struggle for dominance or defense. It is a reflection of a deeper wound that humanity has never truly healed. A wound of distrust, of pride, of fear. And every time that wound is ignored, it bleeds anew. In every home shattered by a drone strike, in every child raised in the rubble, in every soldier who comes home with scars too deep to speak of. But there is another way. There is a call that rings louder than the call to war. It is the call to compassion. It is the call to courage, not the kind that drops bombs, but the kind that builds bridges. It is the kind of courage that looks into the face of a so-called enemy and sees a reflection of God's image. It is the kind of courage that says, I will not hate just because I'm told to. I will not fear just because history has handed me fear. I will not pass judgment on a nation without first examining my own heart. You see, the real power is not in politics. It is not in armies. It is in the human spirit's ability to rise above pain and choose peace. It is in the hands of those who feed the hungry even while the world burns around them. It is in the voice of the one who dares to speak peace while others shout for war. And that power, that spirit, it lives in you. There was a time in my own journey when I believed the problems of the world were too large, too tangled, too ancient to ever be solved. But then I began to see something else. I saw that change begins not in governments, but in hearts. I saw that healing begins when one person chooses to forgive, when one family chooses to open its door, when one community chooses to embrace rather than exclude. That kind of change cannot be legislated. It must be lived. Yes, the cost of political power plays is high. It is written in the loss of life, the loss of trust, the loss of innocence. But there is also a reward for those who choose the narrow path. The path of understanding, the path of humility, the path of relentless love in the face of relentless hatred. And so I ask you, will you be one who sees beyond borders? Will you be one who hears the cries not only of your own people, but of all people? Will you let compassion overtake division? Will you let mercy speak louder than fear? Because the world does not need another opinion. It does not need more anger. It needs healing, and healing begins when we stop asking, whose side are you on? And start asking, who is suffering, and how can I help? The answer to the world's pain will never come from missiles. It will never come from revenge. It will come when ordinary people, like you and me, refuse to see others as statistics. When we see beyond the borderlines and headlines and start living as those who know every soul matters, that's when things will change. That's when peace will no longer be a dream. It will be a decision. One heart at a time, one act of love at a time. That's the real power, and that's the power you hold. There is a kind of war where even the victors walk away wounded. A kind of battle where flags may rise, but souls fall. A war where no one truly wins. Not the soldier on the front line, not the mother waiting by the window, not the leader behind the podium. And in these wars, the enemy is not always the one wearing a different uniform. Sometimes the greatest enemy is pride. When we look at the long and complicated struggle between Iran, America, and Israel, we're not just looking at a clash of nations. We are staring straight into the mirror of humanity's ancient flaw. Pride? The kind of pride that refuses to listen. The kind of pride that will not yield, will not apologize, will not see the humanity in the other. It is the pride that builds walls higher than any missile defense system. The pride that justifies suffering in the name of sovereignty. The pride that says, asterisk, we're right, and they're wrong, asterisk, and stops the conversation right there. But what if we dared to look deeper? What if these world powers, so rich in history and culture, so strong in weapons and influence, were not just enemies locked in endless conflict, but examples of what happens when pride leads and peace follows far behind? In my life, I have seen the devastation of pride, not only in politics, but in families, in friendships, in faith. I have seen fathers lose sons not to war, but to silence. I have seen communities divide not over great truths, but over bruised egos. And I have learned this, that pride is a fire that burns both the hand that strikes and the heart that holds on. The fight between Iran, America, and Israel is complex, yes. It is tied to history, to religion, to territory. But beneath all those layers lies the same root, a refusal to bend, a refusal to understand, a refusal to admit that being powerful is not the same as being right. And this lesson is not just for presidents and generals. It is for you, it is for me, because pride doesn't only build borders between countries, it builds walls in our hearts, it makes us hold grudges, it makes us reject people before we've heard them, it keeps us locked in old arguments, repeating the same stories, justifying the same pain. But here's the truth, peace will never come through pride. It will never come through the elevation of one nation over another, or one voice over another. Peace comes when we lay down the need to be superior and pick up the courage to be humble. When we stop measuring greatness by how many we can defeat and start measuring it by how many we can lift up. There have been moments in history when nations chose humility over hostility, and those moments changed the course of generations. And there can be moments in your life today when you choose the same, when you choose to let go of the need to prove something and instead offer understanding, when you choose to listen even when you've been hurt. When you choose to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you cannot carry the weight of bitterness anymore. The wars of our world reflect the wars inside us. And just as there are no winners in global pride-fueled conflict, there are no winners in personal pride either. But when we choose humility, something beautiful happens. Hearts begin to soften, doors begin to open, healing begins to take root. Let us not forget every missile launched, every word of hatred spoken, every hand that refuses to shake, is not just a mark of political failure, but of spiritual blindness. We cannot keep fighting and expect peace. We cannot keep elevating pride and expect healing. And so I ask you today, what war are you fighting in your own heart? What pride are you holding onto that keeps you from peace? Is it in your family, in your marriage, in your faith, in your opinion of others who don't look or live like you? Because if the stories of Iran, America, and Israel teach us anything, it is that pride is costly, and the longer we cling to it, the more we lose our joy, our unity, our peace. But if we are willing, truly willing to lay it down to say, asterisk, I don't have to win to be whole, asterisk, then we step into a new kind of power, not the power of force, but the power of peace. Peace is not weak. It is not passive. It takes more strength to forgive than to fight. It takes more courage to sit across the table than to storm the gates. And it takes a transformed heart to love someone you've been taught to hate. These nations, like all nations, are made up of people. Fathers, mothers, children, people just like you, and they too want to live without fear. They too want to see their children grow in safety. They too want peace. The question is, will we as individuals, as communities, as a world, let go of the pride that prevents it? Wars without winners are not only the curse of countries, they are the quiet tragedies of souls who never chose peace because pride was too loud. But it doesn't have to end that way. You can choose differently. You can begin a new story, a story of humility, a story of healing, a story where the war ends, not in surrender to your enemies, but in surrender to what is right, what is noble, what is good. And that surrender, that is where true victory begins. There is a great battle being fought, not with guns, not with bombs, but with the unseen weapons of the heart. It is a battle older than the wars of nations and deeper than the divisions of politics. It is the battle for belief. a war that rages in the soul of every human being, a war where faith, fear, and freedom collide, and from that collision destinies are shaped. As we watch the world stage unfold, we see conflicts erupt in places like Iran, America, and Israel. We hear arguments about religion, ideology, and power, but underneath all the noise, there is something far more sacred being contested. It is the right to believe. It is the power to choose hope over despair, trust over fear, love over hate. This is not just about one faith against another. It is about the core of who we are and what we choose to put our faith in. I have known this battle in my own life. There were seasons when I was surrounded by voices that told me to fear, to give up, to protect myself at all costs. Voices that said the world is too broken to change, that belief was weak, that faith was blind, and yet there was something in my heart that refused to bow to fear. There was something stronger than the darkness. A light that kept shining even when everything around me seemed to fall apart. That light was faith, not just in an idea, but in a God who sees, who knows, who redeems. Faith does not mean we will never face hardship. Faith means we will not face it alone. The conflicts between nations may be complex, but at their heart is a question we all must answer. Will we be led by fear, or will we be led by faith? Fear divides. Fear suspects. Fear clings to control, but faith trusts. Faith reaches across enemy lines. Faith sees a future where others only see ruin. And then there is freedom, the cry of every heart since the beginning of time. To be free is not just to walk without chains. It is to believe without force, to speak without fear, to live with conviction, not coercion. Yet around the world, freedom is threatened not only by dictators or armies, but by fear itself. When we are afraid, we trade our freedom for safety. We silence our beliefs to fit in. We harden our hearts to avoid pain. But that is not true freedom. True freedom is found when we live by what we know is right, even when it costs us something. I remember meeting people who lived in countries where faith was outlawed, where churches were burned, where praying could mean prison, and yet their eyes were full of light. Their words were full of courage. Because though they were not free by the world's standards, they were free in the truest sense. They had won the battle for belief, and now I ask you, what is the state of that battle in your life? Are you driven by faith, or have you let fear take the wheel? Are you living in the freedom of truth, or in the prison of public approval? You see, this isn't just a global issue. This is a personal one. The collision of faith, fear, and freedom is happening in your heart every day. Every time you choose honesty over hiding, you are fighting the battle for belief. Every time you choose forgiveness over revenge, you are standing in faith. Every time you choose to speak hope instead of despair, you are choosing freedom. The world is watching these nations clash. The stakes seem high, and they are, but there is another battlefield, quieter yet more eternal. It is the battlefield of your heart, and what happens there will shape not only your future, but the future of all those around you. Because when one person chooses to believe in what is good and right, it becomes a ripple that touches families, communities, even nations. We need people who will stand in faith when fear roars loud. We need people who will protect freedom not just for themselves, but for those who have no voice. We need people who will not bow to the idols of comfort, control, and convenience, but who will rise with courage even when it costs them. Yes, faith will be tested. Yes, fear will try to take hold. Yes, freedom will come under fire. But greater is the one who lives by truth than the one who lives by fear. Greater is the life led by belief than the one enslaved to doubt. The battle is real, but so is the victory. You may not change the course of international conflict. You may not stand before presidents or parliament, but you can choose today to fight the battle in your own heart. To walk in faith, to reject fear, to guard your freedom with truth and love, and when you do, you become part of something far bigger than yourself. You become a beacon in the dark, a witness that faith still matters, that belief still has power, that freedom is still worth defending. The battle for belief is not over, but you, my friend, are not alone in it. And if you will take your stand in faith, then no force of fear can conquer you. No chain can hold you, no lie can define you. This is your time. Stand firm, believe boldly, live free, and let the world see that the greatest power is not in armies or governments, but in a heart that dares to believe. There is a pain in the heart of humanity that no weapon can fix, no border can erase, and no government can heal. It is the pain of division, the kind that breaks homes, shatters nations, and leaves scars not just on the land, but deep within the soul. We are living in a world divided, divided by race, by religion, by politics, by history, and the noise of hatred has grown louder than the whispers of love. But even in such a world, there is a higher way, a narrow path, a call to rise, not in anger but in compassion, to move from conflict to compassion, and to become vessels of healing in a time of hurt. I have seen conflict. I have watched families torn apart over differences. I have stood in places where hatred runs through the streets like a river with no end. I have heard the cries of those who were treated as less, pushed aside, ignored, and I have felt the ache in my own soul when pride would rather win the argument than save the relationship. But I have also seen something more powerful than hate. I have seen compassion, the kind that crosses lines, reaches down, and lifts others up. The battle between nations like Iran, America, and Israel reflects something deeper than politics. It reflects the brokenness of the human heart. Each side believes they are justified. Each has its wounds, its history, its fear. But hatred never heals wounds, it only deepens them. And when we respond to pain with more pain, to violence with more violence, to division with more blame, we become trapped in a cycle that never ends. I've learned in my life that true strength is not found in the clenched fist, but in the open hand. The strength to forgive, the strength to understand, the strength to listen to a voice that doesn't sound like your own and see value in someone who disagrees with you. That is the strength of compassion. And it's a strength that changes the world. Compassion does not deny the reality of conflict. It doesn't ignore injustice or pretend that wounds don't exist. Compassion sees the pain, but refuses to add to it. Compassion says, I see your suffering, and I will not let bitterness blind me to your humanity. It is a choice, a hard choice, but it is the only one that leads to healing. In my own journey, there were moments when I wanted to respond to wrongs with silence or distance. When the safer road was to stay inside the lines of my own comfort, my own group, my own kind, but then something inside me would rise up and remind me that love is not comfortable, love is not passive. Love moves toward the broken, not away. Love steps into the conflict not to win, but to restore. I remember a time I sat with someone who had once called me an enemy. We came from different worlds, we believed different things. But for a moment we looked past the labels, past the headlines, and what we found was that underneath the pain we were both simply human, both hurting, both hoping, and that conversation didn't change the world. But it changed us. And that is how compassion works. One person at a time, one heart at a time. There are many who will tell you to hate. Many who will tell you that compassion is weakness, that you must choose a side. But I tell you, there is a side that stands above the sides, a way that walks between the fire with peace in its steps. That is the way of compassion, and it begins not with nations, but with you. What would happen if, in your own life, you chose compassion over conflict? What if you reached out to the one you've held at a distance? What if you let go of the need to be right and reached instead for the chance to be reconciled? What if you stopped waiting for the world to change and started living as the change the world needs? This world does not need more anger. It does not need more debate. It needs more mercy, more understanding, more people willing to see past skin, past language, past background, and into the heart, because the heart is where the battle is won. Not in courts or parliaments, in the quiet places where love chooses to stand tall, even when hatred crouches at the door. So I ask you, will you rise? Will you rise above the noise, above the wounds of the past? Will you become a bridge where others have built walls? Will you live not as one ruled by the conflict of the world, but led by the compassion of a higher calling? Your life matters in this moment. Your voice can be a bomb or a blade. Your heart can carry hate or it can carry healing. Choose compassion. Choose to forgive. Choose to lift up those who have been pushed down. Choose to sit with those the world has cast aside. That is how wars begin to end. That is how brokenness begins to mend. Because in the end, it's not about being remembered for how hard you fought. It's about being remembered for how deeply you loved. And in a world so divided, love is the most radical act of all. Let that be your legacy. Let compassion be your banner. Let your life be the proof that even in the darkest conflict, light can rise, peace can come, healing is possible, and it begins with you. In times like these, when the world seems to tremble with unrest, when nations raise weapons instead of wisdom, and when power speaks louder than peace, there is a longing that rises deep within every soul, the longing for truth. Not the kind of truth wrapped in propaganda or twisted by political agendas, but the kind that stands tall in the fire, that shines even in the smoke of war, that comforts even when the cannons roar. This is truth in the crossfire, and it is this truth that holds the key to peace, not just for countries, but for every heart. We see the headlines, we hear the speeches, we watch as Iran, America, Israel, and other nations move their pieces across a global chessboard. Words like sovereignty, retaliation, strategy, and dominance fill the air. But somewhere beneath all this noise, people are hurting, children are crying, soldiers are dying, and souls are being lost. Not just to bullets, but to bitterness, to fear, to lies. And in this chaos, many ask, where is peace? Where is justice? Where is truth? I have asked that same question. I have walked through places where tanks patrol the streets and prayers rise from trembling lips. I have met mothers who send their sons to war and never see them return. I have looked into the eyes of those whose lives have been torn by conflicts they never chose, and I have learned this. Truth is not always easy to see in the crossfire, but it is always there for the one who seeks it. Truth is not found in the shouting of governments. It is not found in the slogans or the alliances. It is found in the quiet convictions of those who refuse to hate. It is found in the hands that reach out instead of clench fists. It is found in the hearts of those who still believe that peace is not a dream, but a decision. In my life, there have been moments when the world around me felt like a battlefield, not with tanks and missiles, but with division, misunderstanding, and despair. There were times when I felt caught in the middle, between what others demanded and what my conscience whispered, and I had to choose. I had to choose whether I would add to the fire or become a carrier of peace, whether I would echo the anger or stand in the stillness of truth. You see, truth in the crossfire is not about taking sides. It is about taking a stand for what is good, for what is right, for what brings healing, not more hurt. And that kind of truth may not make you popular. It may not win elections or secure headlines, but it will change lives. It will restore what hatred has broken. It will lead you step by step toward peace that passes all understanding. The wars between nations like Iran, America, and Israel often seem like they are about land or power or control. But deeper than all of that is the war within the war of the soul, the war between love and hate, between humility and pride, between fear and faith. And unless we win that inner war, we will never know peace, no matter how many treaties are signed. Truth calls us to a higher way. It calls us to see the humanity in those we've been taught to fear. It calls us to speak with courage, but also with compassion. It calls us to step into the fire, not to throw more fuel on it, but to bring water, living water, the kind that cools the rage, quenches the thirst for revenge, and washes away the stains of division. In your own life, there may be conflicts in your family, in your community, even in your own heart. And the world may tell you to fight, to defend, to win, but truth tells you something else. It tells you to listen, to love, to forgive. It tells you that peace is not weakness, but the highest kind of strength, the strength to walk away from revenge, the strength to lay down your sword. The strength to say, I will not be overcome by this world. I will overcome it with love. I remember meeting a man who had lost everything in war, his home, his family, his hope, but he told me something I never forgot. He said, they took my land, but they couldn't take my peace, because peace was not in what I had. Peace was in who I chose to be. That is the power of truth in the crossfire, and that power lives in you. You may not stand behind a podium or lead a nation, but you lead every time you choose to love when hate is easier. You lead every time you speak peace into a storm. You lead every time you refuse to let the noise of the world drown out the voice of truth inside you. This world is aching. It is aching for people who will rise, not with rage, but with righteousness, not with vengeance, but with vision, a vision for a world where peace is possible, where children do not grow up learning the language of war, where neighbors do not fear one another because of differences, where the crossfire is replaced by conversation, by compassion, by courage. So I ask you today, will you be that person? Will you seek truth even when it costs you something? Will you stand for peace even when the world mocks it? Will you live not by the rules of war, but by the law of love, because truth is still alive, it still speaks, and it is calling you, not to hide, not to hate, but to hope, to believe that even in a world gone mad, there is a reason to keep loving. Even in a world divided, there is a way to be whole. This is the time, this is the moment, and you are the one. Stand in the truth. Walk in peace, and let the crossfire of this world become the backdrop against which the light of your life will shine the brightest. So now, in the midst of the world's confusion and noise, I call you to be a light. Let the truth guide your steps, not fear. Let compassion be your strength, not anger. In the crossfire of conflict, be the one who carries peace. Choose love when others choose hate. Speak hope where silence reigns. And know this, your stand for truth may not change every nation, but it can change a heart, and one changed heart can touch 1,000 more. The world needs that kind of courage. The world needs you. Now rise, and let peace begin with you.